Headset mic test. Y'all hearing that okay? Headset mic test. Okay, I think we're good, Mike. Our prelude this morning is I in love, in love, in love you sometimes win by Eddie Collins, played by Eddie Collins.
Good morning. Whether you are participating online or here in person, we say welcome home to Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Tim Buckley, and I am so glad you're here. For our guests, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to the Live Oak weekly newsletter. It's the go-to place to know everything that is happening here. There is a link on our home page. Thanks to all for your continued care in following the current guidelines for in-person service, so we can provide as safe we wear masks, observe social distancing, ask children to remain under parents' supervision, as they always should, hum rather than sing to songs, and use gestures of respect and connection other than hugs to greet each other. And we keep a sense of humor during it all. The theme for today's service is the rights of workers, doing business in a generous and ethical way, and taking risks. Throughout the world, when we gather in community, we light a chalice. Therefore, at home, please light a chalice when our minister lights the Live Oak chalice. As we light the flames, I will read a writing by Carl Sandburg. It is based on the Triangle Sheet Waste Factory fire in New York City in 1911. 146 garment workers died in the fire. This tragic event, led to legislation establishing factory safety standards and the formation of the International Ladies Garment Workers Union. The title of the piece is Anna Immorth. Cross the hands over the breast, so. Straighten the legs a little bit more, so. And call for the wagon to come and take her home. Her mother will cry some, and so will her sisters and brothers. But all the others got down, and they are safe. And this is the only one of the factory girls who wasn't lucky in making the jump when the fire broke. It is the hand of God and the lack of fire escapes. Our opening hymn is "Come and Go With Me," performed by the Live Oak Choir, and you are invited to make some noise.
By clapping.
By clapping. We didn't bring out instruments.
Be singing in that land. That day is going to come again. I promise you, have the faith. This day is a precious gift. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. In the words of our theological forebears, the Universalist Humiliati, this church is a fellowship of people united by a common need of religious growth and companionship. We are not a company of saints perfect in faith and righteousness, but acknowledging our failures and shortcomings, we desire to be better than we are and to seek together the fullness of principled living. We strive to journey together in love and peace, to seek the truth and to strengthen and uphold one another. We covenant to make love the doctrine in our life and to make our life a continuing quest for the truth, that it may be made manifest in our words and deeds. It is an ancient and sacred ritual. I was reminded this yesterday when I was on the banks of Brushy Creek, and there is, over by the Round Rock, there is this marker that talks about how a particular part of Brushy Creek is where they used to gather to do worship underneath the oak trees. And I thought, well, that seems kind of familiar. We gather together to search for answers, to be reminded of our worthy aspirations, and to be in loving community. During times of war, instability, disease, want, still, People gather to remember what is good and true and life-giving and to be in communion with one another. So let us celebrate the promises and the possibilities of this day together. Every week when we gather, we share pieces of our lives with each other. We share our sorrows so that we may offer comfort to one another, and we share our joys so that we may celebrate together. And today I'm going to share what is a sorrow for me, but it is also hope for someone that I love dearly, and that is, it has been announced that our music director, Rebecca Mays, who has been here for 27 years, is going to be retiring in January. And we are so grateful that she gave us this length of time. We get to have another holiday season with her at the helm of our music program. We're going to, in January, have some kind of a big musical celebration, but it's also okay for us to be sad at this transition. In this religious community, we hold with reverence the knowledge that each week a multitude of different emotions and experiences are brought together into this space. One of us may be celebrating, one weeping, one filled with determination, one with despair. This mosaic of experiences is holy, and we honor all with our witness. So our story today, our big idea, is called The Fisherman and the Executive. It's kind of like a modern-day folk tale. A powerful executive was walking along the beach in a small coastal village, taking a much-needed vacation. It was his first in more than 10 years. He noticed a small boat with a fisherman who was pulling up to shore. Inside the small boat were several large fish. The executive complimented the fisherman on the quality of his fish and asked how long it had taken him to catch them. The fisherman replied, "Not very long." The executive then asked, "Well, why didn't you stay out longer and catch more fish?" To which the fisherman responded, "I have enough to support my family." "But what do you do with the rest of your time?" asked the executive. The fisherman said, "Well, I sleep late, I fish a little, play with my children, take a nap with my wife, and stroll into the village every evening where I sip wine and play guitar with my friends." The executive quickly interrupted, "I have an MBA from Harvard, and I can help you. You should start by fishing longer every day. You can then sell the extra fish you catch. With the extra revenue, you can buy a bigger boat. With the extra money the larger boat will bring, you can buy a second one and a third one, and so on until you have an entire fleet. Instead of selling your catch to a middleman, you could sell directly to the processor, eventually opening your own cannery. You would control the product, the processing, and the distribution. You would then, of course, need to leave this village and move to the big city and eventually New York City, where you will run your expanding enterprise." And the fisherman then asked, "Well, but how long will that take?" To which the executive replied, 20, maybe 25 years. "And after that?" the fisherman asked. "Afterwards, well, that's where it gets really interesting," said the executive. "When the time is right, you could announce an IPO and sell your company stock to the public and become very rich. You could make millions." "Millions? Really? Okay, well, then what?" "Well, then you could finally retire, and you could move to a small coastal fishing village. There you would sleep late, fish a little, play with your kids, take a nap with your wife, and stroll to the village in the evenings where you would sip wine and play guitar with your friends." After 25 years.
Every week, we engage in the practice of generosity, combining our resources to support the ministries of this church. Part of our mission is to empower dreams, and this Sunday we will be sharing the offering with Camp Kesem to help empower their dreams to support children through and beyond their parents' cancer. If you wish, you may go to liveoak.org and click on Donate, or place a check in the green offering box, which is out as you walked in, offering box after the service. Our offertory music today is Too Old to Work by Joe Glasser, played by Eddie Collins.
Working in the factory all of your life, you try to provide for your kids and your wife. When you're too old, can't work anymore, they hand you your hat and they show you the door. You're too old to work, too old to work. When you're too old to work, yet you're too young to die. Who will take care of you? How will you get by when you're too old to work and too young to die? You don't ask for favors when your days are through. You got a right to what's coming to you. Your boss gets a pension when he gets too old. You helped him retire, but you're out in the cold. You're too old to work, too old to work. When you're too old to work, yet you're too young to die. Who will take care of you? How will you get by when you're too old to work, yet too young to die? They put horses to pasture, feed them on hay. Even machines get retired someday. Your boss gets his pension when his days are through. That pension for him, brother, nothing for you. You're too old to work, too old to work. When you're too old to work, yet too young to die. Who will take care of you? How will you get by when you're too old to work, yet too young to die? There's no easy answer, there's no easy cure. Dreaming won't change it, that's one thing for sure. But fighting together, we'll get there someday. And when we have won, we all will say, you're too old to work, you're too old to work. When you're too old to work and you're too young to die. Who will take care of you? How will you get by when you're too old to work and too young to die? When you're too old to work, you're too young to die.
So that story, the fisherman and the executive, I do think that there were two truths in the story. One is that we do need to think about how we live our lives day to day and not just keep putting off the good times until later. The other truth is that there will always be someone who is convinced that they know better than you how you should live your life. But there's a lot missing in this story, right? I have so many questions. Like the fisherman, his children, number one, how many children did he have? And did they require orthodontia? Because I can tell you, having put, 3 kids through braces, boy, that really adds up. And are they planning on going to college? And if so, is he planning on helping them in some way financially? And how's that going to happen? What happens if he gets sick and he can't go out and fish? And his wife, what if his wife gets some kind of a disease and has to be hospitalized for a while? I mean, that's going to take an awful lot of fish to pay that bill, right? This story that I shared is one that is often shared in corporate gatherings, a way to make us think about what's important in life. And again, that is important, but it's part of, I feel, the illness of our society, that we act like it is solely the responsibility of the individual for how they design their life to be fulfilling and happy, without acknowledging that no, this is a group project. And yes, we do individually have the responsibility for our choices, but the less privilege you have, the more the limitations are around those choices that you make. And I think as a society, what we have to do is we have to start accepting that, we live not for our own lives alone, and that we have a responsibility not just for our own lives, but for making things better so that people have more choices about how they do live their day-to-day. So I'm going to tell you a story about a universalist. I found out about him at the start of our pandemic. I was going through all these Unitarian and Universalist old journals from about like 1918, 1919, trying to find out, okay, how did y'all do church during a pandemic? There wasn't a whole lot there, but I did find this interesting, intriguing little statement. It was about not a church, but about an individual, a Universalist businessman by the name of Arthur Nash. And it says that he was asked one time about how, during their pandemic, all the other businesses around the employees, they had to shut down for a while because the employees got sick, but none of his employees got sick during the pandemic. Why was that? And Nash laughed and he said, "Our employees are too happy to get sick." Okay, I was cynical. That's not how viruses work. But I was also curious. And so I went down the rabbit hole and learned about a most inspiring man. So Arthur Nash was born in 1870, literally in a log cabin in Indiana. He was raised Seventh-day Adventist. His family was devout into that, and so he went to Adventist school and then to seminary and then moved to Detroit to be an Adventist teacher. While he was living in Detroit, he got to know an elderly woman named Agnes Darkenball, and she was someone who had devoted her life to being a humanitarian, and specifically helping those who were most in need, including those who had gone through prison and come out and were trying to make a new life for themselves. He visited her often, got to really know her, got to know what kind of drove her. A few days after she died, the Seventh-day Adventist elders came to him, because again, he was a teacher, and challenged him to tell his students that this lady, as wonderful as she was, she celebrated the Sabbath on Sunday rather than Saturday, and so according to their doctrine, that meant that she was going to hell. He refused to teach that. They charged him with heresy and set a date for a hearing. He showed up for the hearing, and before they could even start, he said, no. He said, if people like Mother Archambault, as she was called, if people like her are going to hell, then that's where I want to go to. And he walked out. And he entered a dark night of the soul. I mean, his whole life had been in this denomination. His whole system of belief and what he thought was true. He went back home. His dad tried to get him to recant. He wouldn't, so he left home and became what at that time was called a hobo, jumping trains, going from town to town, picking up little jobs, being destitute. After about 4 or 5 years of dealing with that bitterness and disillusionment, he made his way back to Detroit, and he started thinking about what Mother had done, her mentorship of him, and what she had held dear. And it was about that time that he also met the woman who would become his wife, and she got him to understand that just because he was leaving that denomination did not mean that he had to leave religion, period, that religion was not a monolith. So he joined the Disciples of Christ and became a pastor, took a small pastorate. And it was there, as he was being a parish minister, that he did a funeral for someone who lived in their wider community. This person was a very good person, but he was not religious. But nonetheless, Arthur gave a funeral extolling all of his virtues. But he wouldn't say that he was going to hell because of his lack of religiosity. And so the disciples of Christ kicked him out. So he had now been kicked out of 2 different denominations. He would, for the rest of his life, remain pretty firmly anti-sectarian. Nonetheless, he found the Universalists, which all the rest of us are going, yes, universal salvation. Why? Like this is everything. This is everything you were getting kicked out of. And he had a minister who he would argue with. He was still trying to make sense out of everything. And this minister was going to be going out of town, and he asked Arthur if he would take the pulpit and preach a sermon. Lesson: whenever a minister asks you to preach, you should probably say yes, because, there's no telling the good things that can come out of that. What came out of it for him was he went to the Bible and started studying it, not through the lens of theology, but just actually reading the words. And World War I was going on at this time, and that was also part of his bitterness, because how could these supposedly Christian countries be doing these atrocities of war? And as he was preparing for this sermon, he got the news that his eldest son had been injured at Flanders. And something in that, and something in reading the words just for the words, made him come to the conclusion that the problem was not Christianity. The problem was that no one was actually practicing Christianity. They were practicing a religion about Jesus. They were not actually presenting the philosophy, the way of living that rabbi had recommended. And for Arthur Nash, it all came down to the golden rule. He looked at that whole idea of however you want people to treat you, treat them. And to him, it seemed perfectly clear. If we all lived by this, we would make this earth a heaven that we could enjoy right now. And so he committed to that. He decided that was going to be the guiding principle of his life. By the end of the war, he was working in business in Cincinnati, and there was an Austrian who also had a business in the same building as he did, and he asked Arthur if Arthur would buy his business so he could go back home to Austria. The price was fine, so Arthur said, sure, as a little clothing business. After all the papers had been signed, though, Arthur realized that what he had purchased was a sweatshop. That there were employees there that were not even making a livable wage. And he stressed over this. He took the books, the numbers. His son had come back home by now. He took them to his son and to his wife, trying to figure out how he could make this work. His son said, look, they're barely turning a profit as it is. I don't think that you can do anything different. I think you just have to live with it. And Arthur came to the conclusion of he couldn't. He had committed himself to this idea of the golden rule. And so he absolutely couldn't believe in that and continue things as they were. So he went to the few shareholders that they were, and he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to raise their pay. I realize it's not going to work. I predict the business is going to go under in about 3 or 4 months. At that point, I'll liquidate it. I'll make sure you get your investment back. They said that was fine with them. He anticipated that there might be enough money that he could buy a small farm someplace, and he would just live on that for the rest of his life. So he called the employees together. He explained the golden rule and what it meant to him. He said, it may not be very long that we're together, but as long as we're together, I'm going to treat you like my siblings. And he wrote about this later, and he talked about when he gave this talk that there was this elderly woman who was still working there, and she was in front, and he looked at her, and he saw his mom, who he adored. And he said, what do you do? She said, well, I sew on buttonholes. He said, oh, okay, I have no idea how to sew on a buttonhole, and I have no idea what you should be paid. How much are you paid? I'm paid $4 a week. Okay, you're going to be paid $12 a week from now on. And he did that with everyone in the company, doubling and tripling their pay. And then he walked away. I mean, he knew, it wasn't like it was a risk for him. He knew it was doomed to fail. And he started traveling around, looking for a farm that he would buy at the end of this. And then a couple of months after he had that meeting, he got the news that a close friend of his had some severe financial issues and was about to go bankrupt, and he had a family. So Arthur, again, trying to live by the golden rule, went to the bookkeeper of the company to see how much money there was, see if he could help his friend in some way. The bookkeeper gave him the numbers, and Arthur couldn't believe what he was reading. Like their profits had gone through the roof. What was happening? And the bookkeeper said, yeah, your output is like 3 times what it was before. So he went down to the floor. He found the forelady, because this company, it was working in clothing, and so the majority of the employees were women. And he found the forelady and said, what's happening? She said, I don't know. We're making more clothes. That's all I can tell you. He kept pushing and pushing until finally she told him. She said, okay, look, after you had that meeting with us and raised our wages, you left, and we just stood around staring at each other in shock. And then, and she pointed to one of the employees, a cutter, and she said that he said an expletive, and then said, you know what, if I were the boss and I had just done this with our wages, I'd want everyone to work like hell. And the forelady said, so that's what we've done. He said, oh, okay. And he forgot about the farm, and he came back to the business with the whole idea of, okay, what if this golden rule stuff actually works? He gave everyone a raise right then. Profits still kept coming in. He gave them a second raise. Profits still kept coming in. He gave them 3 raises in 1 year. At this point, their output, the orders that they're getting, their output is so high, they have to hire more people. So he says, just tell your friends what it's like working here. They increase their workforce by 600% without ever running a want ad. They needed more space. He went and he bought a factory, and he took the factory and put in tons of windows and skylights so that they could get fresh air into the building, a novel thing at that time. He installed what was considered to be a very hygienic vapor heating system. Went back to the bookkeeper. The money is still rolling in. He's not actually happy about this because he really believes like this stuff that he is reading in the Bible, and he believes this idea of the golden rule, and he thinks that it is morally wrong, like for him to become a millionaire on the labor of others. So he goes to everyone, to his workers. This is now a habit. He's calling company meetings all of the time, and he says, okay, here's how much profit we made. I'm just going to divide that by y'all. He plans on dividing it according to as a percentage of their wages. It just doesn't occur to him to do anything else. A day later, the top earners come to him and say, we don't think you should do it that way because then we would get more money than the people who make the least. Instead, you should give the bonus based on hours worked. So he did that. For some people, it was more money than they had ever gotten at one time in their lives. And still, the money kept pouring in. He made them partners. And to where they were having these company meetings all the time and making decisions together. And the thing is, this idea, this commitment to the golden rule, turned out to be contagious because the employees kept coming to him with good things to do. So one example of that was that their cashier had been robbed of the payroll. And the police caught the bandit and he was sentenced. Well, the employees found out that the thief's wife, he had a wife and 4 children. And they said, we think we need to do something about them. So they had a meeting about it. They were kind of, digging in their pockets. And then they finally decided, nope, they were simply going to put her on the payroll. Not working there. All she had to do was take care of her family, and she was on the payroll. They also decided that golden rule should extend to their customers as well. And so even though at that time suits were going for about $50 to $100, their suits, same quality, were going for about $16 to $29. And when the profits still kept pouring in, they decided that what they would do is they would take a percentage of that profits and give it as additional value to their customers, with extra trimmings and buttons and things like that. So are you feeling kind of dubious? Like, how could this, because the money kept coming in. How could all of this work? Well, you're not the only ones to feel this way. There was a magazine called Success Magazine, and a journalist, Ruth Colton, she went undercover. She got herself hired. She pretended to be an unemployed widow by the name of Hattie Clark, and she went into the company, probably planning on busting all of this wide open, right? And instead, she learned that it was all true. And that this attitude did translate to the employees themselves. She had, rented a place for while she was going to be there, and it turned out to be infested with vermin so bad that she had to run away in the middle of the night to the YWCA. She goes to work and is telling everyone about it, and she said instantly dozens of her fellow workers are offering her money, help, whatever she needs. One, the name Rose, says, no, you're going to come home and live with me. And so she did for that couple of weeks. She went out on the weekend. This is something else. In addition to paying well, Arthur Nash cared about the quality of the lives that the workers were living. And so first, they went to a 40-hour work week which back then was revolutionary. And it was one of the things that the labor movement was really championing, the idea of 8-8-8, that you would have 8 hours of work and 8 hours of rest and 8 hours to do what you wanted. Honestly, isn't that still kind of a revolutionary idea, right? If you're, you leave at 5 and like that marks you as not a good employee. So first he dropped them to 40 hours. Then because the company, so many of the employees were women, and he realized, this is, the 1920s, he realized that the women were having to go home and do all of the work at home. I'm glad that doesn't happen anymore. Doesn't happen in my house. Thank you. He realized that that wasn't fair to them, so he established the weekend, where women could go home, and men, and have time with their families. So here Hattie is undercover. She takes her weekend. She goes out to explore the city, and everyone that she meets knows that the cops, the newsboys, they all know about Arthur Nash, and they all have compliments to give. And when she winds up eventually writing the article about this, she quotes her roommate Rose, who said, "It don't make no difference to that man, Arthur Nash, whether you was black or white, Jew or Catholic, or one of them Adventist, he'd treat you just like you was his own sister, and to tell the truth, we ain't got the nerve not to do the same." So this was also the time of the rise of the labor unions. And for quite a while, they did not have a labor union in the A. Nash Company, because he wasn't against the labor unions at all. He looked at how other companies were being run, and he said, "I believe in trade unions. They are necessary and will be necessary as long as the present avaricious organization of capital continues." But he just felt that a labor union couldn't do as good as leading a business based on the golden rule. But that finally changed, and it changed because of two things. First of all, the anti-union businesses, the businesses that were fighting the unions coming into their shops, they started pointing to him like he was on their side and using him as an excuse. And then also what happened is the word had gotten out now about what was happening in his company, and he couldn't be there all of the time. And he wanted some sort of body of people who could go through the company floor by floor on a regular basis and make sure that the rights of his workers were being taken care of. So he finally met with the head of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers of America, and then had a company-wide meeting that is about like 2,000 employees by this point. Had the union come on in, and this was controversial because the employees, remember, at this point, they're like shareholders. They like the way things are going. So he actually wound up being the advocate. He got up in front of them and said, "Are we to be pointed to as an example and quoted as an argument why avaricious organizations should be allowed to exploit their labor and grind their dollars out of the very sweat and blood of our brothers and sisters in their factories? Or shall we join with this great group of organized workers who are striving to loose the bonds of wickedness, lift the burdens of the heavy laden, and let the oppressed go free?" And it was a vote, and they voted for the union to then come in. When he started all of this with this company, in 1918, the business was doing about $132,000 worth of business. He came in and made those immediate changes, raising everyone's wages. A year later, they were doing more than $500,000 worth of business. That was in 1919. By 1925, they were doing $12 million worth of business, and they were the largest producer of direct-to-consumer clothing in the U.S. Now, you may be asking, what does this have to do with you? You're not a business owner, or you're retired, or maybe at your place of work, you don't have the kind of influence to do these kind of things. But every one of us has our own particular spheres of influence. The coffee shop that you go to all the time, or the government things like the library that you go to. Be curious. Be brave enough to have awkward conversations or awkward emails where you contact the owners and say, hey, I'm just curious. What's the starting pay, for your company? Are they covered for benefits? Are they covered for insurance? Ask those questions and then make decisions accordingly. We don't go for the easy answers. This is something that a friend brought to my attention recently. We were talking about the whole issue of like local coffee shops versus Starbucks. But if you look as an employee, Starbucks can offer things like scholarships and benefits. I haven't done the research. Y'all can do the research. Find your local coffee place or whatever. And then let's share that information. Because again, the responsibility for designing a person's life, we probably shouldn't be like the executive thinking that we know better how someone should live their life, but we also do have a responsibility for the whole structure of the limitations and the choices that are available. I invite you now to join me in a time of meditation, making yourself a little bit more comfortable, enjoying the feeling of the sun and the breeze and this beautiful day, and closing your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. In 1911, James Oppenheim celebrated the movement for women's suffrage by writing the poem Bread and Roses. It came to be associated with the labor movement when striking textile mill workers marched and carried signs saying, "We want bread and roses too." The idea underneath it is that we don't just work to pay for the bare minimum to survive. All people deserve not just a living, but a fulfilling life with joy and meaning. We work not only for bread, but for roses to grace our homes, roses to make us smile. Here are Oppenheim's words. As we come marching, marching in the beauty of the day, 1,000,000 darkened kitchens, 1,000 mill lofts gray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses, for the people hear us singing bread and roses, bread and roses. As we come marching, marching, we battle too for men, for they are women's children, and we mother them again. Our lives shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses. As we come marching, marching, unnumbered women dead go crying through our singing their ancient song of bread, small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits new. Yes, bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we come marching, marching, we bring the greater days. The rising of the women means the rising of the human race, no more the drudge and idler that toil where one reposes, but sharing of life's glories. Bread and roses, bread and roses. And our closing hymn today is Bread and Roses by Oppenheim and Farina, sung by Julianne Knott.
A million darkened kitchens, 1,000 mill lofts gray, are touched with all the radiance that a sudden sun discloses. For the people hear us singing, bread and roses, bread and roses. As we come marching, marching, we battle too for men, for they are in the struggle, and together we shall win. Our life shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses. As we go marching, marching, unnumbered women dead go crying through our singing their ancient call for bread. Small art and love and beauty, their drudging spirits knew. Yes, it is bread we fight for, but we fight for roses too. As we come marching, marching, we're standing proud and tall. The rising of the woman means the rising of us all. No more the drudge and idler tend that toil where one reposes, but a sharing of life's glories, bread and roses, bread and roses. Our life shall not be sweated from birth until life closes. Hearts starve as well as bodies. Give us bread, but give us roses.
I'm Carrie Krause, the Director of Lifespan Faith Development, and want to invite anyone who would like to stay for our programming, which starts at 10:30. The elementary students and the middle school students should meet over near that sign, and you'll be split into your groups. And the high school students will find a blanket down here, but high school includes 8th graders this year, so if you're in 8th grade and up, please join your advisor down there. And then for the adults, today we're doing our first Sunday of Fuller Conversations on living our values, and the topic is the locus of moral authority, and we will gather around the accessible picnic table here. So see you then.
And the fight for workers' rights goes on. I don't know if you've seen this, but they are calling this October Strike-tober, because there are several unions who are drawing attention that there are some things that are happening in different industries, things like systems, two-tiered systems of benefits and pay. And so there's a good chance that, well, already there are some striking, and there will probably be more. If you got our letter about our canvas, which is going on right now, our stewardship season, you'll see that our theme, chosen several months ago, is Snap, Crackle, and Pop. And it's referring to a decision that was made back during the Depression, where Kellogg's decided during the Depression, rather than to cut their costs, to invest. And it was a very wise business decision that has served them well. However, Kellogg's workers in several of their factories say that they are not being treated well, and so they are on strike. And so even though our theme is Snap, Crackle, Pop, at the end of this month, we're going to have kind of a fun cereal-based celebration, but if those workers are still on strike, it will not be with Kellogg's profits, or it will not be with Kellogg's products. So just wanted to let you know that we are also trying to live out what we preach. May you go forward knowing that you are lovable and loved, and you are not alone.
We invite you to stay after the service and enjoy fellowship time with one another and the faith development activities today. We extinguish this flame, but we recommit anew to carrying into our week the flame of justice and love. May we share with others the courage and strength we find here. Our postlude is the song Lonesome Tumbleweed Waltz by Eddie Collins, performed by Eddie Collins. Thank you.